Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for Smart Growth Protects Rural Communities, hosted by the Prince William Conservation Alliance. And I am Evelyn Parks. I'm the Operations and Programs Coordinator with PWCA. And I'm excited to be joined tonight by our two fabulous speakers, and that is Kevin Parker from PWCA and Stewart Schwartz, who is part of our co-host organization, the Coalition for Smarter Growth. The Prince William Conservation Alliance is an environmental grassroots nonprofit that is dedicated to building sustainable and equitable communities across Prince William County. So I'm going to share my screen so I can tell you a little bit more about that. All right, so this is our website here, and if you'd like to learn more about the work that we do, you can visit our website. Oops, sorry about that. It's just trying to move the pictures out of the way. You can come to our website here, which is pwconserve.org, and find out more about our work, including our 3Rs vision. And then if you'd like to see what we have going on, you can come here to our calendar. And on our calendar, you can see what events we have coming up. So this Sunday, that's May 31st at 8 a.m., we have the last Sunday bird count for May. And that is a part nature walk and part citizen science project because while people are out on the nature walk, they are counting the number of bird species that they see. And that data gets reported and is used to help monitor bird populations. So if you're looking for a nice peaceful walk to do in the morning and also be helping out with citizen science, that's a great opportunity. And May is one of the busiest, most active of the bird walks. And then if you look ahead, we have the annual NABA Butterfly Survey. This is on July 19th, which is also a Sunday. And this is also a citizen science project. So this is an opportunity to go out and work with other volunteers around the Manassas area to collect data on what butterfly species are seen around the area. And no experience is required for this. We do provide training, and you'll be with a lead that's done this before. And then the data for our Manassas Circle gets reported back to NABA, and it is helping to be aggregated with the rest of the data across North America to give them a better idea of what's going on with those butterfly populations. And then lastly, if you like to garden, we have a pollinator garden at Merrimack Wildlife Management Area. And on every Saturday in June in the mornings, we'll be having our garden work days. So if you'd like to come out and support and care for the garden, you can join us in the mornings and help to keep the garden nice and healthy for the butterflies, bees, birds, all of those native pollinator species. So these programs, these upcoming events that we have, as well as all of our past events that you can see down here, we keep these programs free because we want to be able to provide as much information to local residents as possible, but the programs themselves are not free to put on. And we're able to do that and keep these programs free and keep them going because of the generosity of people like yourselves. So if while you're looking at the website, if you feel inspired and would like to donate, you can come here to the donate button in the top right, and that will take you to our donation form right here. And whether it's $50 or $500, every donation truly, truly makes a difference. We're a community supported organization, and we couldn't do our work without you. All right, so just a few housekeeping items before we get into today's topic. We'll start with our speaker presentations, and then we'll move into the community conversation and the Q&A section. During the speaker presentations, we ask that you please keep your audio on mute and please keep your cameras off in order to prevent any bandwidth issues. And then once we get done with that, we'll switch over to the Q&A. In the meantime, if you have any questions or any thoughts that you'd like to share, please utilize the chat for that. And then we'll circle back to the chat when we get to the Q&A. And when we get to your question, please feel free to come off mute and come back on camera so that you can share your question and we can have that community conversation. So with that, that's all the housekeeping. And so we'll go ahead and get into smart growth. And our first speaker is Kevin Parker. And Parker is the secretary of the board of the Prince William Conservation Alliance. And he is deeply involved in advocacy for local land use issues. He also spent 3 years working alongside our founder, Kim Hosen, as an environmental educator. And he's a regular presenter at our annual Bluebell Festival. So if you've been to that or come to that in the future, you'll probably see him leading a tour there. He recently had an op-ed published in the Washington Post, and the article was entitled, "Bikes Make Life Freer. These Laws Could Change That." And that article highlighted nationwide proposals for laws that introduce bike licenses and associated fees. So if you haven't seen it yet and would like to, let us know. And Parker is also an active member of many citizen science projects, and this includes helping to monitor populations of the protected Virginia bluebird, as well as regularly participating with the last Sunday bird counts that we were talking about earlier. So tonight, Parker will share the story of how he discovered different movements and arguments that he thinks belong in the fight that rural Prince William County residents are already involved in. And his portion is called "Fighting Sprawl Next Door in the Big Picture." Over to you, Kevin. Parker, I'm sorry.
Hello. Thank you for joining us tonight. Let me share my screen here. Okay, so basically the seed of this talk started at a planning commission meeting last December as I watched people at the mic speaking out against the 3 Vint Hill housing developments. As I listened to all the comments, I noticed certain types of arguments were mostly missing. Comments were local and specific, not arguments about the big picture, systemic arguments, or arguments questioning underlying assumptions. I made one systemic comment. And it was so out of place that some of the neighbors of the projects shifted in their seats to turn back and look at me and watch me as I walked away from the podium. Who is this guy? Why is someone from the East, from the EBSCO, talking about this project? It seemed like they were thinking. Maybe I sounded radical, but someone needs to bring up the flaws in the system. That's what tonight is about. As I considered the arguments against sprawl left out, I thought, why? Our stories determine, well, it has to do with how we see place and the stories we tell ourselves about place. Our stories determine what we focus on and what ends up outside of our awareness. Everyone has stories about how we got to where we live, and our stories about where we're going to go and live. So consider two archetypes of stories. One type I've heard from those living in the rural areas of Prince William County, the people there, stories of wanting to move out to the country, wanting to build your own house, to have space, a place where you can grow things, a place where you have control of your surroundings by owning land. These are stories about sovereignty and about stewardship, where you have the freedom of not having people all around you, and the people that are around you are so limited, you can know all of them. You might have a story like this, like those people at the meeting. Some people still have this dream. They aspire to move out to the country and tell this story. For them, the country is a far-off place they wish they could be. Success in this story is measured by space. These stories have another side about wanting to get away from a place, about wanting to get away from the city, from the noise, the strangeness, the fear of danger, the cramped living spaces. Just as the dream of the rural is a pull, there is a push of the urban to get away. Okay, stick with me. Take a drink. Now, think about another archetype, a story going the other way. Not the dream of the country, but the dream of the city. People who dream of the excitement and vast possibilities of the city. Cities are exciting and full of possibilities for career success, meeting new people, eating new things, new culture, even fame. And freedom, but a totally different class of freedom. The freedom to be anonymous, to be able to reinvent oneself, to start anew. These are stories about opportunity and possibility. For them, the city is a far off place they wish they can be. Success in this story is measured by access. The city dream has its own escape story, wanting to get away from the country, from being isolated, having little options, having people all up in your business, knowing about your history, with cemented views about you from decades ago, or even from when you were just a kid. You've changed since then. These two aspirations are in our popular culture. The classic move to the New York dream, like in Friends and Sex and the City, all show the pull of the excitement and anonymity and reinvention. Or the homestead dream, like in Little House on the Prairie or Yellowstone, or apparently, I just learned this, a bunch of modern reality TV shows like Homestead Rescue. What these stories have in common is that people saw the problems of where they were and wanted to go to a place without them. The problems of that place were the focus and stay their focus. They're both aspirations, dreams that are part of identity, identities that keep certain things out of focus. Now, in between suburban sprawl is the uncanny valley of the two dreams. It's a place that historically promises the country, does not deliver on those qualities, and promises city access, but does not live up to that either. It's the spork of places. My perspective, I grew up in the suburbs and focused on the problems of the suburbs. I wanted to be in an exciting city or deep out in nature. The suburbs are neither, but I stayed anyway, and now I want to help fix them. But that's a totally different program. In the 1990s, I worked as a door-to-door canvasser for an environmental group. I'm going back to the slides. If I can find them. I'd go into the DC office near U Street, and we'd head out in vans into the suburbs of Virginia and Maryland to our turf. A lot of them looked the same, subdivisions with winding roads and cul-de-sacs. One afternoon, walking out on turf, I looked around and I had no idea where in the Washington area I was, except it was somewhere in the suburbs. The only thing that told me where I was a plane in the air. It was coming in low, so I was near Dulles Airport. The landscape gave me no information. It was disorienting and surreal, and I never forgot it. I was in a placeless place. Later, working at the Graduate Center bookstore in Merrifield, there was a stack of books among the stacks of assigned books. The title, The Geography of Nowhere by James Howard Kunstler. I picked it up because I thought, that was it. I've lived that feeling. I started it in the store, and it's funny and angry, and I bought it. I hope that there was enough left for the actual students. It's about how cars shaped our built environment aesthetically and structurally. Car-sized places before World War II and human-sized places built before. Get it. After reading that book, I understood the world differently. Why my friends and I wanted to go into DC and just walk around up and down M Street in Georgetown. It was not just because of the store Commander Salamander. I got why it felt special to go to Occoquan. The buildings meet the sidewalk. The streets create a room. It also made sense why it didn't feel good to be in the open parking lots of Potomac Mills. I'd never been able to articulate any of this. It was a revelation to me. This is how I got started thinking about the built environment. That book introduced me to a movement. So there's this whole subculture, professional school of thought and activist movements. It's a long history. The word that best describes them is urbanism. Urbanism is how people interact with the built environment. You might not want to focus on the word, but if there are people and buildings and they're interacting, then that's urbanism. Much started when one person asked how a street worked. This is the kind of question that is so basic, nobody thought to ask it. Jane Jacobs did, as you can see here. She was an activist and journalist and was watching her Greenwich Village neighborhood get bulldozed for urban renewal in 1960s New York. She needed to understand and articulate what was worth fighting for. She observed the street like a naturalist, how there was a mix of uses, how people used the sidewalk, what changed when there was few or more people. What she found is in the book that is a foundational text for planning and urbanism. The streets she fought to save back then, the ones that survived, became the examples. The principles she found observing them are now what planning and architecture students study to understand what makes places work. Those in our own Prince William County Planning Department learned about these streets in school studying planning. The new urbanists are designers, architects, and planners who started in the 80s looking at the type of streets that Jacobs described and said, we should build that again instead of building suburbs and strip malls. They've spent decades trying and had some success. One is mixed use became a legitimate zoning category because of their work. Next time you hear a development called PMR, Planned Mixed Residential, that's where the mixed came from. New urbanists got it in the code. Now, often in the county, the word is kept, but the thing is left out. Then there's Chuck Marone from the group Strong Towns. Marone is a small town Minnesota engineer and planner who came to similar conclusions from a different angle, municipal finance. Marone asked the question, what makes a town work financially? He ran the numbers on suburban development and found that every new subdivision approved is actually making the long-term financial problem worse for his town. Development that's supposed to solve the budget is the thing that's creating it. Roads, water, sewer, schools, emergency service, the math doesn't work. It's closer to a Ponzi scheme that requires new development at the edges to pay for the maintenance of the old developments inside. And just because we have data center money here doesn't mean it makes sense. Then there's the YouTube generation. Biggest of the channels is Not Just Bikes, with millions of views. It's a genuine cultural phenomenon. He traveled cities around the world after growing up in suburban Ontario, fake London, he calls it, and moved to the Netherlands. Jason is not for everyone. His videos make sharp criticisms about places and transportation in Canada and the US in comparison. Also, City Nerd, City Beautiful, and a whole urbanist YouTube ecosystem making these ideas accessible to more people. Some of them live here. I've met some and connected with Mariana from Nokesville and Nick from Woodbridge, who found these ideas through YouTube. This is how people are learning about this now. These sides don't all agree. They start from different places, design, finance, transportation, engineering, but they arrive at overlapping conclusions about the same development patterns. When an activist journalist, a fiscal conservative engineer, an architect, and a Canadian YouTuber all end up critiquing the same sprawl, that's not coincidence. So now you have a sense of the movement. Even though you may not choose to live there, I bet you've loved one of these types of places at some point. First, traditional college campuses in the US. The campus and often the college town too. You sleep in a dorm, you walk to class, you walk to the quad, the dining hall. This is a place for humans. It's a type of walkable urban place. Next, quaint towns. Locally, we have Occoquan, but there are many quaint old towns people love to go visit and just walk around in. Then there are U.S. city downtowns. The walkable parts of cities are the parts of the cities that you think of when you think of these cities. Think of any city you've walked around in and liked. Next is old European towns. You may have traveled to Europe and enjoyed places that were built even before the U.S. was a country. For hundreds of years, they existed in the context of travel on foot. There's also simulation towns. Disney's Main Street USA. Walt Disney hired designers who studied what made pre-automobile towns feel good and then built a version of it into Main Street USA at his theme parks. One personal example is summer camp. You might think me, who was an introverted kid, would dislike living in a camp with the personal space reduced to a bunk bed and a trunk in a room of 16 kids. But though I was quiet, I watched other kids and activities and I felt a part of it. We walked to the dining hall, to the lake, to activities everywhere. It was a great experience living in this dense setup. When I left and went back to the isolation of the suburbs, it felt devastating. Later, when I read the geography of nowhere, my mind went back to that time. Fictional walkable places. Many have enjoyed walkable places in books and shows. Hogwarts is a walkable human scale space. You can get everywhere on foot and you can have chance encounters with people like on the moving staircase. Star Trek Enterprise is a walkable place. Just a turbo lift ride and a walk down the hall, and you're where you need to be. Your work, your quarters, the replicator, anywhere on the ship. The reason these places, the campus, the Old Town, Hogwarts, the Enterprise, feel how they do is they are human scaled. Humans like human sized places. In a way, humans are like cats. Cats like cat sized places. You can see this most clearly with kids. Do you remember finding a kid sized place and how exciting that was? Or do you remember seeing your kids or grandkids find kid sized places? Maybe there was a pillow fort or a fort in the woods or a tree house for the lucky. So now that I've talked about the places, I would like you to keep these places, the real human scale places, in mind as we move to our next presentation. Okay, thank you. So now I am happy to introduce Stewart Schwartz, who is the executive director and founder of the Coalition for Smarter Growth, the leading organization in the DC region advocating for walkable, bikeable, inclusive, transit-oriented communities as the most sustainable and equitable way to grow and provide opportunities for all. The coalition recently celebrated its 29th year. Stewart Schwartz has a long, the Coalition for Smarter Growth has a long history of aligning with the Prince William Conservation Alliance, and he worked with Kim on fights such as Cherry Hill. Mr. Schwartz is a member of the Urban Land Institute and the Congress for Urbanism and serves on the boards of Smart Growth America, the Virginia Conservation Network, and the Richmond Partnership for Smarter Growth. This presentation is a blueprint for a better region, how smart growth can protect rural communities and improve quality of life. Over to you, Stewart.
Hey, thank you very much. Your presentation was just lovely and philosophical, captured much of the path that I took as well. Yeah, I first of all came from Connecticut down to the University of Virginia through Navy ROTC. I will still remember to this day the 2-lane in each direction I-66 and that vision of the mountains I first got when I reached about the Gainesville area and turned down south on 29. Arrived at UVA to check it out for the first time in a spring visit in April, and I said, "This is it. This is where I'm going." And of course, the very walkable grounds at the University of Virginia were a huge influence. While in the Navy, I saw many sprawling communities around the country. It must have been making an impression on me. After my 9 years of active duty, wanted to do something environmental, went to law school back at UVA. They made me work a lot harder for that one. But while I was there, I too read Geography of Nowhere. And also, you saw a picture of Andres Tuani and Elizabeth Platter-Zyberk, two of the many founders of the Congress for New Urbanism, which was actually founded in Old Town Alexandria around 1991 or so. Once I'd heard them speak, I was hooked, and my law degree At that point, man, I was not going to be an actual practicing lawyer, but someone working in public policy and land use. The groups that were involved in the Disney debate back in the day formed the Coalition for Smarter Growth and hired me to be their first coordinator. This was back in 1997. And it's been quite the journey since then. We are a staff of 7 working out of DC, but working in Maryland, DC, and Virginia. And as was noted, I also work with groups in Richmond, reaching out with groups in Fredericksburg, Hampton Roads now, as we continue to work on this. We might have started with 10 or 20 people in the whole entire DC region working on these issues at the time, but today there are thousands. And what I'm going to show you is a version of a presentation we first created way back in 2002 and helped change the debate. We have fancier versions of it now and a YouTube video that you can find on our website at smartergrowth.net, which I highly commend to you. It's a 3.5-minute video. But I just want to get to you an illustration of where and how we grow and should grow, how we design our communities, how we can protect rural areas through creating better, more walkable communities in the right places. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Hold on. I'm screen sharing, but where's my presentation? There it is. Hopefully you can see it.
Looks good.
Okay, let's move. So this is our main service area, but admittedly, Loudoun and Prince William, we are only the merest support actors. The Piedmont Environmental Council and many other great groups are working Loudoun County, and your Prince William Conservation Alliance are the great leaders in Prince William on conservation and smart growth, and we're here in support. We also do work at the state level on state policy in the General Assemblies in Maryland and Virginia. You know, there's an interesting story to our region, right? Here's our Washington Beltway. I think it was on opening day. Here it is in 2000. More lanes, but sort of the same picture. Here's what it's meant. There are even more lanes added with the Wilson Bridge, you know, at its 12 lanes and the major interchanges. And of course, you've seen the Springfield interchange as well, consuming hundreds of acres of land. We keep trying. I-66, I-95, this is I-95. Even with the toll lanes, they will fill up. And in fact, they depend upon the general purpose lanes filling up, so people will pay the tolls in the middle. And many of you may know outer beltways have been proposed, including this portion, the Western Transportation Corridor Tri-County Parkway. They would have encircled Manassas Battlefield, used 234 as part of the outer beltway. You know, it's also right through the same place in the Rural Crescent where the data centers were proposed to go and hopefully will never go. It's not by accident that many of these roads got built. There are lobbyists, and this is the lobbyist picture of all the highways they wanted built over the years, with a heavy emphasis on Northern Virginia, because this was a Northern Virginia lobbying group. But we often ask, well, why so much traffic? What's the root cause? And it's a cause is land use. And this was something done way back by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation around the year 2000, showing developed land, and showing where they thought the trend was going. And that seemed like a long time away, 2030, back when they did it. And I'll toggle again. Unfortunately, a lot of this did get built. Take some more careful analysis. You can see a lot of places where we did slow this spread of development significantly through all the activism of groups like the Prince William Conservation Alliance, Protect Prince William, and so many others that have been working to preserve rural areas while we work on creating better communities out of our city and our suburbs. So the other reason for the traffic, beyond spreading far out, is the separation of everything. That's why we ask, where's the center in Centerville? And, you know, this is very true in Prince William as well, where in this picture, I see office buildings, I see a church, I see townhouses, I see multifamily, a shopping center or two, and you're going to drive on every one of these trips. You're not going to walk. You're certainly not going to let your kids walk or bike to anything here. But it has all the components of a village or a town yet it's just arranged in such a way that it uses tons of land and creates lots of traffic. And of course, all those cars, all that driving needs parking lots. And we took these pictures on a Sunday years ago to show how much land we lose in parking lots, which also makes the world less walkable and sustainable. And then in terms of lack of walkability, we have these various illustrations of people in pretty harsh environments. The child on the lower left trying to walk where there's no sidewalks on an old part of Route 1. Folks in the upper right are trying to get to a metro station in Prince George's. Person waiting for a bus by a large arterial. And on the lower right is Route 7 and Bailey's Crossroads. We've been doing a safety campaign there because that street has not changed since this picture was taken in 2000. So we created a blueprint for a better region, a different vision for the region. This happens to be a picture of the Mosaic District, something we supported in Fairfax County and is hugely popular as a gathering place, a mixed-use development with an arts theater. It's got a Target, it's got Mom's Organic Market, it's got multifamily housing, retail, townhouses, parks. So our blueprint started to change the debate. And in 2005, the developer group, Urban Land Institute, had this reality check exercise. Yes, we played with Legos, but the net result of this was a vision of a walkable, transit-oriented communities for the DC region, bringing more jobs to the east, more housing and jobs into the city, and more housing in places like Tyson's Corner. 5 years later, the Council of Governments passed Region Forward, which essentially adopted this community vision for walkable, transit-oriented communities and did a number of follow-on reports after that on housing and where it should take place. Fortunately, our region got way ahead back in the 70s when Arlington did 75 community meetings, came up with their bullseye plan for the Roslyn-Boston corridor and their other metro corridor, focusing development, putting the orange line underneath the old aging commercial corridor, and promoting the sort of transformation I'm about to show you. Roslyn, 1970s. Can you believe they were storing oil there? And there were pawn shops. It was, not much happening. And then Roslyn is in the distance there, and Courthouse is in the foreground, two of the nodes. And in the years since this aerial was taken, that space in between has been filled up with medium density development, all within walking distance of the two metro stations, plus multiple bus lines, bike share, et cetera. We pushed really hard for Fairfax to adopt this approach as well. And back in the day, Fairfax considered Arlington a four-letter word, didn't want to be like that. But by 2005, when we did reality check, we also initiated the Tyson's Task Force when the Coalition for Smarter Growth and the Nature Forward went and met with then Chairman Connolly and said, we really need to replan Tyson's. He said, okay, that was a 5-year process. But they said, we want to be more like Arlington in our commercial nodal areas. So we've got the metro stations here, VRE. It's hard to see, but in the yellow are lots of commercial corridors. Maybe 10% of the county's land could absorb most of their future growth in mixed-use walkable places. And they've been doing it. Perhaps not fast enough, but they're doing it. And here's an illustration of Tyson's. They had 40,000 it was 40 million square feet of parking and 40 million square feet of development when this picture was taken. And now they're transforming it with a grid of streets, walkability, mixed uses in Tyson's. And this was an early illustration during the planning process of how the streets could be transformed. But it's happened across the region. This is Twin Brook on the left, King Farm on the top right, White Flint on the lower right, Pike and Rose, very popular mixed-use development with a grid of streets, all in the old commercial corridor of Rockville Pike in Montgomery County along the Metro line. Opportunities abound in Prince George's County. Greenbelt still looks like this. This was where the FBI was pitched, but there are a number of metro stations that are finally getting development in Prince George's County. On the east side of our region, lots of room to grow. Purple line is going to be another key to this as well. This was the groundbreaking, and hopefully we will finally get it running next year. And even in DC, the Connecticut and Wisconsin Avenue corridors, Coalition for Smart Growth is really working hard for transit-oriented development up and down those corridors, especially up in Friendship Heights, where there's a lot of room to grow. And it's also about, as we really talked about in Fairfax or Prince William and a Route 1 or corridor or a 234 business corridor, How do you transform that corridor? This is an early computer simulation illustration of how a corridor could be transformed into something much more humane. And we have fought for what we believe in. This is a list of all the projects that CSG over the years has supported. This list is only current through 2015. So you can add a whole other column of these for all the things we've been doing since 2015. We just haven't had the intern to update it like we did the last time. The newest thing, of course, that you may be hearing about is missing middle housing. The young generation is very frustrated. They are not starter homes, ways to enter the housing market. We've been doing really well in high-end, higher density transit-oriented development, some great medium density stuff. That's towards the right-hand side of this great illustration from Opticos. But some of the middle, and we do pretty well in townhouses, but we don't necessarily do 3-story. We don't do duplexes, fourplexes, 4-unit buildings, and so forth. So there's a lot of looking at this as a possibility, particularly in places like Fairfax, Arlington, and Alexandria, where there's such a demand to live. And how can we evolve gracefully in these? And so this is complicated. It's a hard thing to do. That's why so much of our focus remains the metro stations, bus rapid transit corridors, the commercial arterial corridors where we can create more livable communities. But it's also true of the small towns that we have in the Piedmont. And Kevin talked about Occoquan. You have the historic Manassas. Our towns are a model for walkability, and they can be gracefully grow as well. And it's all about places for people in the end. I think with our increasing disconnection through all the online media that we have today, that people are hungering to be back together. And that's why CSG leads a lot of walking tours, has a lot of happy hours. People are out at cafes. People are looking for places, much like the Mosaic District in Fairfax. So the flip side of this is, first, let's grow where we already have infrastructure. Let's transform those parking lots. Let's create these walkable communities where we already have infrastructure, but let's conserve the rural areas that we have. We need it for habitat. We need it for water supply. We need it for recreation. We need it for our health. This is an illustration of the easements, land under easements, that as a result of all the great work of the Piedmont Environmental Council, from Loudon all the way down to Charlottesville, Albemarle, with preserving places like this that are within reach of all of us, not very far from Prince William at all. This is out the Route 50 corridor, Route 50, Route 17. And then, not too far away, just north of Prince William, up Route 15, at Route 15 and 50, we have the whole Gilbert's Corner roundabout area. There was supposed to be a 4-lane divided highway put through here by VDOT, I think in the 80s, $300 million at the time, probably $1 billion today. And this roundabout solution has maintained traffic flow while helping conserve the land, and all this land around this in this view is conserved at this point. And of course, they put their farm there. If you haven't visited, I highly recommend it for a tour and creating local food for the local food bank. Same thing over Montgomery, Sugarloaf Mountain. You can go hike it. This is part of the Ag Reserve in Montgomery County. It's on the Frederick-Montgomery border. There's the Ag Reserve. And they transferred development rights into their growth areas and also tied it to an affordable housing program when they adopted this groundbreaking land conservation approach. And I'll towards the end here, Evelyn gave me this outline here in green of your rural crescent. The pink is your watershed, and Prince William Conservation Alliance has done a wonderful job of pointing out the importance of our watersheds and protecting them for our water supply. So even more reason to grow in the parking lots and retrofit those with more modern stormwater than they would have had 20, 30 years ago. You can see Manassas outlined here. The opportunities to grow are in two major areas of the county. And here's some illustration. I just did screenshots, so they're not well focused. On the right is the Woodbridge area, which could be the gateway town center for the county. And it's been years we've been talking about it, and we really need to make progress there. You've got a VRE station there. On the left is a little farther down the Route 1 corridor. Lots of acres of land for the potential for redevelopment into mixed-use walkable places. Potomac Mills, and it's hundreds and hundreds of acres, and the transformation that could take place there, much as we've transformed Tyson's Corner. It'd be a different scale, but it could be done. Uh, the Route 234 North Business Corridor and all the potential there. And I understand there have been various discussions about how to transform this. And innovation, I put a question mark. It's disappointing that this was an opportunity. It was a blank slate. There was the opportunity to create a truly walkable grid of streets and mix of uses throughout this area. But it's generally going to end up being pretty disconnected, pretty car oriented as it's finishing out, and that's a lost opportunity. I'm concluding with basically saying you already have your experts right with you and hosting this event in the Prince William Conservation Alliance, and their 3 Rs: the reimagine, reinvest, redevelop. I just did a screenshot of part of the fact sheet that they have on their website on the 3 Rs, which captured these areas. The red for the suburban urban core areas that we can redesign and make more walkable, more connected for people walking and biking, provide more housing, retrofit with modern stormwater while preserving the forested belt and the rural crescent and protecting your Occoquan water supply. So we have a choice to make which path through the forest we're going to choose. And hopefully together we'll choose one that is more sustainable for the future. And I'll stop there. Thank you all.
Thank you, Stewart, and thank you, Kevin, before. Those were both wonderful presentations. That gives us a lot to think about. There's a lot of feedback in the chat, getting a lot of people thinking. I don't see any questions in the chat, just a lot of good thoughts. But does anybody have any questions that they'd like to come off mute and share? Well, go ahead.
If
Someone have
nobody
one?
has any questions, I have things that I don't know. I have loads of questions I would like to ask Stuart, and loads of things that I would like to talk about. I could probably take your list there of projects and just spend a lot of time at the map there. Um,
Before you do that, Kevin, let me
yeah.
just, Stewart, you're still sharing. It's just showing Zoom, but just a
Oh,
heads up.
sorry about that. There we
No
go.
problem. Okay, go ahead, Parker.
Yeah, we have the opportunities that you show there. There's a hopeful project in the Manassas Mall area. There's an old Kaiser Permanente building that I was biking by, and I thought that would be good for residential. And I saw on the county site that somebody is planning on doing that. So there's like one little piece of residential in the Potomac Mills area. Now Woodbridge and the station and Woodbridge, I have been advocating for a better bridge over Route 1 in the county, and I am joined by active Prince William in telling the county that we need to have a signature bridge that feels good to just walk on. Because a lot of times you see these over a big road pedestrian bridges, and they're thought of like just go, just like people, it's not like human behavior. It's just like, okay, well, you can go, but it's not, Jeff Speck and walkable streets is like, it has to be interesting as you walk. And these places, they aren't interesting and they don't have enough people. And hopefully, we can get a better bridge over Route 1 there. In the Sudley corridor, we have that empty spot that's right by Manassas Mall, and Manassas Mall has had this redevelopment project where they're building in the parking lot, and there's a piece of land beside it that really has potential that I have some ideas for. Okay, Ashley has a question.
Yeah, so a couple things, and Elena asked about communication with the Prince William Board of Supervisors. I've been so stretched that in recent years I have not spent a lot of time, locally with you all. I sometimes see the supervisors and the board chair at the Council of Governments events, which is a great place where I can catch officials from across the region and talk to them at that time. I know that the board and the planning department are working on things like affordable housing and inclusionary zoning, accessory dwelling units, things like that. I think that's important part of this. I actually did brief many of the current, well, many of the, I think it was only Democratic supervisors showed up to this briefing that was set up years ago when they first ran for office. Now some of them are in their third terms. But I'm not sure it all stuck. But in terms of Ashley's question about smart growth protecting rural areas, and this also goes to you as advocates. You want to, I think the win we've achieved at CSG is because we're not anti-growth. We're growth in the right places. We're growth through designing the right types of communities, and we combine it with rural conservation. Of course, protect the rural crescent first and and the rural areas first and foremost with good zoning. The most successful downzoning in Virginia history was for the Occoquan that occurred on the Fairfax side, where I think it went from 1 acre lots to 5 acre lots. Obviously, it could be more than that. I know some of the number of acres per lot vary in parts of Prince William's rural crescent and Loudoun's rural area. In the absence of being able to do a downzoning that can withstand challenge, I think it normally could, but I think there'd be nervousness to do it. We need probably a stronger transfer of development rights law in Virginia. We got one passed around 2007. It was bipartisan. CSG played a role in that, but the development industry refused to let it be like Montgomery County, Maryland's, which is actually a bank where the landowners who were downzoned were given development rights in return, which were parked in a bank, which could be bought by developers for higher density and designated growth areas, and the funding would go to the original landowner farmers. They would be compensated for it. So, for example, they might have had one house on 5 acres. They were downzoned to one house on 25 acres. So you went from 20 development rights to 4. So you got 16 TDRs, plus you had the 4 25-acre lots. Since then, they've even tried to retire some of those 25-acre lots with a building lot termination fund to purchase and retire those as well. And then if you set the TDRs to go in areas where you need revitalization, that's a useful tool. Use of conservation easements would be really important. Some jurisdictions have a fund of their own to purchase conservation easements. Others, rely on the work that PEC does in getting donated conservation easements. Somebody I knew once years ago actually wrote the federal law that allowed for the tax deductibility of conservation easements. Virginia also has tax deductibility, and you can actually sell the easement benefits that you had received. If you don't have enough taxes to offset, you can basically sell your tax credits to someone else who has more income to offset, which is a very progressive program. So all those are possible tools.
Thank you, Stewart. Elena, would you like to come on and share more about your last comment?
Sure. So I'm multitasking, so I'm cooking dinner, so you don't have to see my messy kitchen right now. So I guess the term exclusionary zoning has been weaponized against the rural crescent and against the community, to be perfectly frank, who support those protections. And I guess my question is, the 3 R's is really utilizes our strategic plan as a roadmap. And I guess what I'm wondering is how do we sort of flip the narrative from exclusionary zoning to opportunities in areas that are clearly experiencing a much needed redevelopment approach. I love Mosaic as a model, but it feels like a heavy lift to convince our supervisors that there are opportunities that we have to find the right developers for. So how do you have any suggestions or recommendations for flipping that narrative from exclusionary to opportunities in areas that would really benefit from this, actual live, work, play
Well,
approach?
just the way you use the right word. It is, we need to create opportunities. We certainly need revitalization. We should not be, um, we can't afford to support all the new infrastructure for greenfield development and fix what we've already built, our aging infrastructure. CSG has been trying to total up. We've already come up with about $85 billion statewide in aging infrastructure. That doesn't include transportation infrastructure. That's water and sewer and old schools and so forth, that we have in the state. So we have opportunities for more homes in and jobs in places that have been left behind. We have
Right.
opportunities to reinvest in those places with our public dollars in infrastructure investment. There's a reason why there's a federal program and federal tax breaks for opportunity zones. And I'm sure Prince William has defined some of those. Many of the jurisdictions in the state have them that will further incentivize developers to come to these places. I think the county could be making it easier to do redevelopment, perhaps, than now. What I always recommend is public engagement, envisioning the future of a community through a small area planning process. Create the small area plan. Sure, it includes a grid of streets as you redevelop. Perhaps use a form-based zoning code, which is one that talks about the building form you want to see, buildings built to the sidewalk rather than set back. It's a more visual representation of zoning, and then find ways to streamline the approval on the back end while also prioritizing your infrastructure dollars to those locations. So there's not enough money to go around and keep chasing new greenfield development with new trunk sewer lines, new schools, new police stations, and so forth, and also maintain and upgrade what we've already built in existing communities. So I think it's unfair to existing communities to ignore them while going out supporting new greenfield growth.
About the
Right.
exclusionary zoning, I think that talking about the stewardship of the land of the people that are out there, and tying it back to last week's program, and this the big picture we're talking about is the built environment, and last week's program, the big picture was groundwater. So there's multiple different system levels, and the people that are out in the rural area are the stewards of this resource, and so they serve that role. And you add that, and then add the excitement of the dense areas, and I think that, I don't know, each person probably is receptive to a different argument, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Going back real quickly to Mosaic, it was around 1999, the same year I was working with Kim to support the comprehensive plan in Prince William that the first time defined the rural crescent, that I was invited by then Supervisor Connolly to participate in the planning for the Dunn-Loring Merrifield area. And they, in those early days, planned a grid of streets, a mix of uses, both up at the metro station and down in the Merrifield area. And I can't remember all the other things they did to set the table for this, but then a terrific developer came in, Eden's, that's a retail-based expert developer, but and we're great at creating great places. The county worked with them to attract the Arts Theater, the Angelica, and there are probably some other incentives that were created. It was on old industrial land, where the old open air movie theater, drive-in movie theater had been, and followed by, I guess, another multiplex. And they just took advantage of that opportunity to create a really great walkable place. And the popularity of it is an indication that we need more of those places.
Stewart, that it's been making me think, listening to all this discussion, like it seems like this is a wonderful idea, and why wouldn't we want to go that way? And it probably all comes down to money. Is it easy or is it difficult to quantify all the benefits of something like the mosaic, like the reduced school needs for school buses because things are more centralized, and the reduced car trips, and the emergency services being more centralized? Is that kind of stuff
There
quantifiable
are
for the board
studies
to
out
look
there
at?
all over the place. I'd highly recommend a firm called Urban 3 out of Asheville,
Mhm.
North Carolina.
They have great
They
video.
have they have documented how compact development generates far more taxes per acre than spread out suburban development.
Okay.
Obviously, strong towns have certainly done the fiscal costs of unsustainable growth. That's helpful. Um, the I think Jeff Speck in his book Walkable City or Suburban Nation and some others have
Hmm.
drawn on some studies that talk about how um, yes, your school busing costs are really high in a disconnected, sprawling suburban community.
Hmm.
Dr. Bob Schneider, the head of PRTC, your transit company, talks about the challenge he and his team have of providing um, good bus service for such a spread out county. It is very costly per rider per mile because of the dimensions of the way the county's been laid out.
Right.
I don't want to depress everybody with all this because it is quite the challenge. And then the other thing you'll find that there are actual studies on is police and fire response times are so inhibited by disconnected cul-de-sac development that they have to then build more police and fire stations so that they're in more locations and they to get to the response time differences distances and times that are called for by their standards or by their safety standards.
Wow. That's a very crucial one. Thank you. Ashley went ahead and put the link to Urban 3 in the chat, so we'll definitely go ahead and check out those resources. All right.
Unfortunately, Prince William, yeah, does lack some high capacity transit, but I think that Alan, that electric bikes could be a game changer for suburbs if we can keep, them from, if we can get people to see them the right way. And if we can have these little cut throughs that are sometimes even there official. I don't take the bus system because I can ride my bike there faster. It just takes really long, and we don't have the bus rapid transit, which is what you need to like really, to skip over stops and stuff. So I think that if we can expand our bike system, that would be one way to repair and allow density because a lot of the conflict that we have with density is people really afraid of parking problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the evolution takes a little bit of time. I mean, uh, parking in spaces per unit, you can get to decline over time as you make these other investments. I think it's a great point about electric bikes. They have become a game changer in cities and towns across the country, especially when you have terrain like Prince William in the east, when you've got hills and things. And many more people are using them for short trips, for errands and things like that. They can be, particularly convenient, but you do need to have the protected bike facilities to make that safe enough to use so that they're not forced to use the sidewalks and where then there are going to be conflicts with pedestrians. Other transit opportunities would be the Route 1 corridor itself. Fairfax is putting in a bus rapid transit along their part of Route 1. The long-term plan called for it to come down into Prince William, into Woodbridge and south, and that could be done. You certainly have a wide enough road. You can convert a lane in each direction to dedicated bus. 234 business has possibilities. Places where there's a lot of activity, where you want to put a mix of uses, you can start to have more frequent bus service in those places. The other thing is we talked about cul-de-sacs. Someone was just telling me the other day, is it an architect who lives in Fairfax, talking about their neighbor on their cul-de-sac. There were, I think, two older ladies, one in each house, and they basically let all the kids walk between their houses for every year for years to go to school. to cut through. And I think if we would just create easements for connected pathways for our kids to walk to school or the store safely between cul-de-sacs, that alone would help. And maybe fewer trips that mom and dad have to take them on is another possibility.
Yeah, if anybody has any of those cut throughs, one thing I've done is I've looked at a map, and as I ride around and I see these little cut throughs, I've, taken pictures of them, taken a screenshot of the map, and sent it in to the bike ped guy in our planning department, uh, or is he our transportation? He's Bryce Barrett is his name. And he has said that he's looking for ways to make this happen. And I have a whole, like, I don't know, 8 or 9 of these. And if anybody's on the West and has more, and you see some little unofficial cut through that people use, it would be good to have more of those, on the like wish list, basically.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Looking in the chat, I see we have some back and forth about the housing difficulties for the younger generation. Anna, do you want to come in and say anything about, do you have anything else to add about the comments you've been adding in the chat or any questions?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I find this whole conversation quite interesting, being a small rural farmer here in Western Prince William. And there's a disconnect that I feel strongly between ideas that are good and what people actually are willing to live with. That is not ever addressed. And I do think that Western and Eastern Prince William are very vastly different. And I know we are the same county, but people are not the same. And the way people live is not the same. And so I've been frustrated with the conversations around development here, in particular in Western Prince William, which are few and far between.
Thank you for that
That's what I
comment.
would say.
Yeah, I can understand that. And so much of this is public education, getting out, doing presentations like this, talking to people, having people have a role in shaping the future of each of their communities at the very local scale. One thing on the economics that we're seeing is we're now probably in a tough real estate environment in terms of new production in some ways. Townhouses, apparently they can sell forever because there is so much demand and need. But too often we build townhouses without the town, is what I like to say. Isolated developments that are not connected to their neighbors in any way. And so I always wonder if these are places people will stay for their entire life cycles, and then I do think that the type of, we'll call it higher density development that you would likely see is what's going to be affordable for them to build. So you'd see a mix of townhouses, ideally again on a network of streets, and having 4-story or stick built, or what they call 4/1s. You can even do 5/1s where it's the wood frame on top of a concrete or steel podium, which is supremely livable. All of Copenhagen is built at, I think, 6 stories or something like that, and very, very livable in that Danish city.
One thing we have coming up here a lot is these 2/2 condominiums, and they're being built in the new Courts District, and there's like 3 other places that this is a very common. It's like townhouses, except they're one stacked on the other.
Yeah, I've seen those. I remember when they started those in Alexandria. I think as land values go up and land prices go up, you'll see more of those. That's certainly a possibility as well. Yeah, I mean, this has never been easy in Prince William County in particular. I see comments from Anna here and others. You have to. CSG does not endorse or work on behalf of candidates, but you always have to be educating candidates. We can do that, and others 501c3s can do that. I think with great leadership, you can promote win-wins in terms of the value of conserving rural areas and having rural enterprises, local farming. We need local food, local tourism, and less lower infrastructure costs to the county. Fewer school kids to educate in those places, but also the value of revitalizing our older areas.
Melody has a comment about community land trusts, and I saw a program about a place that's on like the outskirts. Seemed like a similar area to Northern Virginia or just Virginia in Connecticut, and they had this whole thing about community land trusts
Yep.
where you just buy the house and then they keep the land. Do you know more about that?
Well, we have Maggie Walker Community Land Trust in Richmond and the Douglas Community Land Trust in DC. Essentially, the nonprofit buys and retains ownership of the land, or they're given public land to retain. A new home is built. You qualify it as a first time home buyer, an affordable home at an affordable rate. As values increase, there is shared equity. If you decide to sell, you get some of the new additional equity that came, but the land trust keeps the other equity, such so that they can keep the home affordable for the next owner. So it is a shared equity model. I do think it is one opportunity. I do think, our houses of worship are very interested in providing more affordable housing. You heard all the debate about the faith in housing bill. This year it did pass. It also included property tax exempt nonprofits. The latter made me a little bit nervous. I actually was a little nervous about church camps and Boy Scout camps, including the one in Prince William County. So we did argue that it had to be connected to water and sewer. But the churches can significantly discount the land and partner with a nonprofit affordable housing developer to provide affordable housing.
There's one of those near me.
Yeah. Great. And then
but I also see forests that on church land that I would really, really pained to see go to.
Yeah. But there's also, often they have large parking lots, I mean, yeah, there's some trade-offs in each case. You'll have to do each one. That's why we also, during the debate in the General Assembly, working with Southern Environmental Law Center, we wanted to have environmental requirements retained and not have those projects exempt from environmental reviews like we have for other development. I was going to go back to about the story about young people. I ran the numbers on the 700 square foot condo I bought when I was in the Navy and working at the Pentagon. It was in Alexandria near the metro. It was 4 times my income as a 27, 28-year-old. I ran the numbers a few years ago. It was 8 times the income of a similarly aged person in my staff, getting a comparable salary. And in some places now 12 times young people's incomes. So that shows the difference between incomes and home prices that we have seen. That's why people are trying to look at how can we build more duplexes, fourplexes, triplexes, as condominiums, so that people can get a foot on the homeownership ladder.
Yeah, that's a big issue nowadays. Those numbers paint the picture.
Mary asked about the land around the McCourt building, and there seems to be a big disconnect in the county with that land, where the capital improvement projects has a plan for all these buildings, but they don't seem to be talking to planning and thinking about how it works in a planning sense. They are just thinking, we have rents that we're going to pay, that we have to pay, so we need to build buildings to get out of those rents. I have suggested that we not expand and take out the forest near the McCourt building, because it's part of our forest belt that we have in the middle of the county that we're continually chipping away at. I would suggest that we develop towards Tackett's Mill, where we have some opportunities. Yeah,
I can understand that. I remember all those late night meetings at the McCourt building over the years when I've visited the county and the big debates. And I always wanted, I said, boy, this place is out in the middle of nowhere. It was such a long drive in from I-95, as I recall.
Hmm.
And, one of my suspicions over the years has been that public in buildings like that were used to extend water and sewer that then the private sector could tap into. And I sometimes see that as well with schools being put farther out, leapfrogged
Mm.
out into the countryside, and hospitals even around Virginia that are taken out of downtowns and moved out. And then the public pays for the water and sewer trunk line extensions, and then suddenly the private development connects in. So it's something to watch out for. Who's serving on the water and sewer board, for instance, or the hospital board, or the school board?
Yeah, that's come up in some of the conversations we've had about what's going on in the more rural areas in the rural crescent. Melody, I see you have your hand raised. Would you like to come off mute?
I can figure it out. Sure.
Yeah, you
Um,
got it.
I wanted to just throw a little thing in when you were talking about affordability for younger people and getting housing. One of the things, I actually have a meeting with the guys that are doing the Mapledale Plaza redevelopment on next week. I sent them, uh, Kevin knows this, but he was there when I trapped them in a parking lot for 2.5 hours. But I sent them an alternative, like 50-page proposal of like how to not overdevelop that space. Um, and they were surprisingly receptive to a lot of the environmental concerns that I had. I live
Good.
right behind Mapledale Plaza, so
Okay.
one of the things that I would like to propose to them, to his point, and I'd like to throw this out and see what you guys think about it before I actually propose it to developer. I'm a volunteer in the fire department. I've been in the fire department for about 30 years. One of the challenges that we run in Prince William County is illegal ADUs, right? We have a ton of people who rent out their basements, who rent out their guest rooms. Those are not official rental spaces. They'll just throw a padlock like on the basement door, which creates a giant fire hazard for those of us who are first responders, but people don't have any place that they can afford. So, I mean, I live in an estate community, and probably half of the houses in my neighborhood are illegally renting out their basements. So, when they're building the townhouses in Mapledale, one of the things that I'm going to suggest to them, because they already have kind of flexibility through some of the waivers that they've been approved, that they do official ADUs in the basements of those townhouses.
Great
Uh,
idea.
that, it's 400 square feet, maybe 500 square feet. A 24-year-old could afford 900 to $1,100 a month. It's a townhouse community, so you've already got community, you've got commercial space right there. I've also got a bunch of proposals to them to turn that more. You mentioned Denmark earlier, to turn that, and this is where I think the county might actually push back, to turn that like sea of asphalt that is the 1990s parking requirement. I think there's 480 parking spaces, and they're never full. Right now it's full of 18-wheelers, actually, because there's 18-wheelers that park there overnight. Um, but turn that into, pull it up and make it permeable, put swales. They're going to clear cut the 18 acres. So they're losing a tremendous stormwater management system that nature provided. But go ahead and put a European style plaza, right? Like keep everything out on the edge, keep the multifamily out on the edge, keep the townhouses out on the edge, and then turn the center of it into farmers market shared space, ground level retail, bioswales, like a community park. To Kevin's trail desires, put um what is it, Sharon Balcom, I think is the name of it. Like Andrew Lake Park, there's a plan to connect that like all the way through the Dale City Rec Center. Um, I've talked to them about genetic diversity of animals because we're creating all these little pocket islands where all these animals can't get to other animals, and so you're getting these inbreeding challenges that becomes a vector for disease. Virginia just passed a law on wildlife bridges. So I've asked them to take some of that funding and put it to a wildlife bridge behind the ice center. It's because there's a massive swath of trees like behind the Prince William County Ice Center. But like I think to your point, if we, and I don't know how the county feels about this. I know how Victor Angry feels about it, but he is so pro development that I think he doesn't really care about anything else. Um, I think if we build with ADUs embedded, we might address some of that youth issue. There's a lot of kids in the fire department, kids, okay, they're 20, 5 and under, but like they really feel like they cannot live here unless they live with their parents because they cannot afford to even rent unless they get, you know, 19 friends in a 900 square foot space.
Yeah. Well, lots of great points. I'm not familiar with the particular development, but that's shows a lot of the great creativity we should have for new developments. And the simplistic description is that you build up to, in turn, save the forested portions of a parcel that you're developing. Um, the point you made about people living in unlicensed accessory dwellings within basements that are not safe, where they don't have safe fire exits and so forth, is just an indication of the housing crisis that we have. And now the developers are using the housing crisis to basically say, let us build anywhere. We're trying to channel it so that we build in more location efficient places with greater walkability, lower transportation costs. Um, One advantage of having a good accessory dwelling unit law is that you can uh, legalize ADUs and set right standards. But you're exactly right about if we're going to have new townhouses, let's do things like do them with an English basement level where you still have some windows. The condo building I was in was only 4 stories, and the first story was an English basement style unit. And then we had our own outside stoop. So that would address some of your fire code problems as well as being planning ahead for accessory units.
Yeah, thank you both. Lots of great ideas, Melody, and that would really help to address that problem. It has come up in our Where Were We Headed discussion that we had at the Sweeney Barn that came up as was one of the topics. And even the supervisors talked about that and about how we're building, but we're not building stuff that actually solves the problem for people for that range of housing. Jason, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. Jason
Hello.
Williams, Neabsco District Trails and Blueways Council. I may have misunderstood the comment there, but I would definitely say that Supervisor Angry as well as Supervisor Bodie are very pro parks and recreation and trails. And yes, phase 2 of the Neabsco Greenway has been approved in the Parks Department inventory to be formally planned, developed, and built. I believe the funding is there. And technically now you can actually go all the way from Andrew Leach Park to Sharon Bockham on unapproved trail that's not formalized yet, but they've been huge advocates in pushing that forward with the Neabsco Greenway. Over.
Nice.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, that'll be really nice to be able to connect through that.
There's
Go ahead, Parker.
there's also a proposal for a bus transit plan on Dale Boulevard. That was at the county was asking that to the Northern Virginia Transit Authority. And but it's just a plan, and Dale Boulevard has a lot of like it's really old and it doesn't have like sewer pipe or stormwater pipes. And I think that if we want to improve it, they're going to want to do a lot more work. So I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah. All right. I don't see, thank you, Stewart. I understand you have to sign off, and I don't see any more questions in the chat. Do we have any more questions, anyone? If so, feel free to come off mute and ask your question.
And I'll continue to stay in touch. Just be squeaky with me because we're spread thin.
Understand. Well,
Good
thank
to
you,
know.
Stewart, for your time. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Thank you, everyone, for all the great discussion tonight, especially to our speakers for all of your great insights. This has given us a lot to think about. We will send a wrap-up email, and this really has hit on the topics in our 3 Rs, trying to help navigate smart growth and putting growth where it makes sense in a way that helps to make walkable communities, but also protecting those areas, those more rural areas, and not having that sprawl in the middle that has all of those problematic issues that we talked about. So we'll include links in our follow-up email, including the handout from Kevin and a lot of the places that were mentioned on this call as other reference materials. So keep an eye out for that next week, and that'll also include this chat and the link to the video once it's available. So thank you everyone so much for your time tonight and for all of your great ideas and insight. Have a good evening.
Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.